Gerald Knaus is the chairman of the European Stability Initiative, and he joins us now live from Berlin. Good to have you on the show, sir. Now, the relationship between Turkey and Germany goes back to World War I, and then you have the two Turkish workers going to Germany after World War II, the Syrian refugee crisis. But when you look at it from the perspective of the Berlin conference, how would you categorize these two countries' relationships moves forward?
Well, I think despite a lot of tensions, disagreements and conflicts in recent years, Berlin and Ankara need each other on a number of issues that are of huge interest to Germany and Turkey. Stability in Libya is obviously a major European concern. In recent years, this has been the deadliest border of the European Union, where in 5 years, 15,000 people have drowned, which is an incredible number. And in order to stop not only the arrival of people in boats, migrants and refugees, but also the massive human rights violations in Libya, you need peace. So Germany hosted this meeting, and it is clear that Turkey and Germany have the common interest here. Secondly, in the Aegean, in the eastern Mediterranean between Turkey and Greece, it is not a coincidence that the most important agreement reached in the last 5 years to deal with the biggest refugee crisis in the world in the last decade on the Syrians was reached in a meeting between Germany and Turkey in the Turkish embassy in Brussels in March 2016. Here too, Germany and Turkey are the two countries in Europe and indeed in the world that have done the most to deal with the fallout of the refugee crisis coming out of the Syrian war.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about the refugee crisis in just a bit, but I just want to ask you one more question about the situation in Libya. Germany has stepped in, and we got here because it was perceived, perhaps, that the West had dropped the ball in terms of Libya, whether it's the visible absence of the United States or maybe a divided approach to the situation from the European partners. Do you feel that we are here because of the resurgence of countries like Turkey and Russia and the role that they're playing in the Mediterranean?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think one of the problems has also been that the European Union itself has been divided. We've seen very different approaches to Libya between, let's say, France and Italy. So it's not just that there are many outside players that have obviously different interests and support different players. It's also that inside the European Union there have been disagreements. And so it's all the more important to bring everyone together and realize that the worst for everyone would be a situation where Libya turns into Syria, where a conflict that has already been ongoing for far too long completely spins out of control. And what we've seen in recent months with the fighting around the capital, Tripoli, it has been a warning. So I think Germany shares the sense of the UN, which has been trying to mediate, that the only way you can make any progress is if you bring all the major players together and establish a clear sense of what needs to be done. But the problem remains that even in the EU, there are still different views on the different parties fighting in Libya.
Okay, fair enough. You referenced the Syrian refugee crisis and the migration over the Aegean Sea, so let me ask you about that. President Erdogan has often used the threat of sort of proverbially opening up the gates, which would allow millions of Syrian refugees to travel to Europe, which is essentially what they want in the past too, in the disagreements Turkey has had with the European Union. Chancellor Merkel has acknowledged the effort, the great effort that Turkey has put throughout this process. Do you think that this will continue to be sort of a carrot and stick game between Turkey and Germany in the future and the European Union?
Well, the paradox is that Turkey and Germany on this have a common interest, which is to persuade the whole rest of the European Union to continue to provide financial support for the Syrians in Turkey. This financial support, the 6 billion, which was agreed in March 2016, has all been programmed, so assigned to projects. 3.2 billion have been spent almost 5 billion contracts have been signed, but this money was supposed to be for a few years. And now the debate in Europe has to be, will the European Union continue with this money? And Germany is in favor of this, and Angela Merkel has been clear about this. You hear it also here in Berlin among all the major parties, but not everyone in Europe. So actually, Berlin, Athens, and Ankara, Greece, Turkey, and Germany, together have to remind the rest of Europe that the Syrian refugee crisis is not over, that Turkey, since 2014, is the country with most refugees in the world, and that the number of refugees in Turkey continues to grow. So the costs here are obviously high, and it is in the interest of everyone that Syrians in Turkey have a decent life. Now, last year, 99.5% of the Syrians in Turkey stayed in Turkey. The number of Syrians who got into boats and came to Greece all year was only 16,000, which is a very, very small fraction of that group.
Yeah. All right. Well, these are just some of the topics that Presidents Erdogan and Chancellor Merkel will be talking through on this Friday. We'll be expecting to hear from them in the coming hours. All right. Gerald Knaus, thank you very much for joining us here on the News Hour. We do appreciate it.